with that, we'll call the meeting in order if that's okay.
Yes,
Amber,
sir.
do you want to call roll?
Yes, just give me 1 second here because I'm in the midst of allowing audio and video for all of the members.
Do it.
Okay, no problem.
Stand by.
Yes.
Standing by.
Okay. I'm not exactly sure if everybody got audio and video because there was kind of a little rush there at the last second. But if somebody didn't get audio and video, please email me and I will switch it over.
It looks like Paul Silverman has his hand raised.
Okay, let me change his.
No, I can call roll. You ready, Bill?
Yes, ma'am, I am.
Bill Stedham,
Here.
Byron Underwood. I think.
He's here, but he doesn't have audio, I think.
Okay. Cindy Bass.
Here.
Sarah Bang. I saw her. Yeah, I can see her. Rita Blevins.
Here.
Christopher Gonzalez. Ew. There he is. I see him. Carl Leatherman.
Here.
You too. Candy Linsman.
I'm here.
Mandy Nichols.
Here.
Cassie Scott.
She has her hand raised. She's here.
I'm just staring intently. Paul Silverman. I think I heard he's on. Yeah. Okay. Christina Valero. Okay. And that's it.
All right, thank you. Okay, so with that being said, we'll get the meeting going, and I hope everybody had a wonderful holiday and are enjoying our Texas winter, which should be in and out of here by Friday at noon. But between now and then, at least in North Texas, it'll be interesting. We also want to welcome our new committee members, Christina Valero, Christopher Gonzalez, and Paul Silverman. Welcome. We're glad that you're here. And I don't see Abby. She's up next.
No, you know what?
Speaking of winter.
Speaking of winter, Abby could use all of your kind thoughts because she is trapped in a hotel room with her 2 children and her husband in the blizzard in Kansas.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, no. So, but
Little.
Vanessa, does that mean you're going to do housekeeping and committee training?
Here I go. Yes, I'm going to do both of those. And here we go. Housekeeping. This is actually, except for us, an entirely virtual meeting. So we ask that advisory committee members have their cameras on. It is likely best that you mute. So advisory committee members have the ability to mute and unmute, and they have video access. Everyone else who's on that's not a member, they don't have that access. It's really just meant to be a live stream. So if you are a member, we do ask you to have your camera on. We ask that you stay muted as much as possible because it always ends up being a day where like there's something in the background and we've got construction in the background. I don't know if you'll be able to hear it. So staying muted is helpful. But that said, feel free to unmute yourself and speak up like you would in any meeting or conversation. There's also a hand raise function, and depending on your screen, it's either at the bottom or it's at the top. It's just a picture of a hand, and you push it and you raise your hand. Don't forget to unraise your hand. And it will actually number the hands in order of who raised their hand first, which is, I think, probably really helpful to Bill. And we try and keep an eye on it, but if your hand has been raised for a minute, you may just need to go ahead and unmute yourself and speak up, because sometimes you miss it. And then everyone in here knows how to use this microphone, so I won't give my spiel about that. And that is housekeeping. I need to actually, I think, join this meeting, so hold on. I registered, but I don't think I actually joined. Hey, y'all, I don't know how to join this meeting. Denise. Where am I?
There has to be a link in the email.
Oh, because of the register.
Okay, this goes to Claire.
Does that not here? All right, hold on, guys. Sorry. Join event. Sorry, everybody. Oh, no. Not yet, not yet.
And then Amber's got to do it.
Amber's gonna let me in, but I don't need audio. Only need video. Okay. Okay, I am in. I'm gonna stay muted because I'm speaking through this. And I'm going to share I can turn my camera off. Wow, this is, sorry guys. I have used Teams before. I have. Okay. I'm sorry, you guys. I have the training open. So Denise, I may need you for one more second.
You're doing great.
Thank you, everybody. I hope you're enjoying this real world glimpse into what people at the office have to deal with. To share. And then, oh, it's just been a second. We haven't had any meetings, you guys.
Yeah. Has it been? I do. Is it Word?
That I had it open.
Word open.
So sorry, guys.
How do I do it? It might be just a different
I think it's a PowerPoint. ESAC committee training. Okay. Oh, I see. Okay. All right, guys. I got a new surface. It's a whole thing. Share my window. There it is. Okay. Now, what's interesting about this that no one else is going to find interesting, but I'm going to have to figure out is normally I would present this in Teams. All right. Well, you know what? We're just going to do it. We're going to do it and we'll figure it out. I'm only saying that about the audio version, or there's a video at the end. So, Amber, if you can hear me, I'm going to struggle with the video presentation at the end of this training. Okay.
So sorry to jump in, but we use Teams all the time. When you hit share screen at the top, there's a thing that says enable audio or share audio as well, and that will share the audio on the video at the end.
Okay. Wow. Thank you.
Thank you.
What's interesting about this to me, and I think this is my surface being the problem, is, or maybe I just need to open it into, there we go. No, I just need to open it into, that's not gonna let me. Okay. Well, let's just do it, guys.
Presentation.
Yeah, I'll do it in presentation then. All right. We'll try that at the end. Okay. Here we are at Track Advisory Committee training, otherwise known as training me on how to do things in Teams. Okay, so every year we do this training and we've got some new folks this year. So really pay attention, new folks. We're very happy to have you here. And annually we do this training just to, it's a little bit of a refresher if you've been on the committee. Certainly it's helpful if you're new to the committee. And some of it you're like, yes, no, I know this, but I think it's always really helpful to just walk through it. So this is ESAC, here you are. We're gonna go into the Texas Real Estate Commission track. which I'm sure everyone knows this, but TREC is the state agency that exists to safeguard the public interest and protect consumers of real estate services. And we do that through education, licensing, and enforcement. And we also ensure the availability of qualified and ethical service providers. And the second part of our mission is to facilitate economic growth and opportunity across Texas. So you can see that's a little bit of a two-part, right? So there's the consumer protection component of it, and then there's the balance of facilitating economic growth and opportunity across Texas. And I always just think of TREC as being, we license, we educate, we enforce, right? And you guys stick more in the realm of the education component part of that, but all of those factors play in. And when we'll talk about this a little bit more, but when you're here in an advisory committee capacity, you're serving a different role than you are as just a license holder, right? And we'll get into what the specified ESAC roles are in just a second. So back to the commission. The commission consists of 9 members, which are all appointed by the governor. And 6 members are brokers, and they bring experience in the industries that TREC regulates. So they have to have been engaged as licensed brokers as their major occupation for the 5 years preceding an appointment. And, that's really beneficial because you've got folks who are in the real world, similar to how this committee is made up. And that brings, we can write rules all day and we can talk about things that we see and enforcement and things like that. But I think the commissioners bring that perspective that, that real world experience of being out in the industry. And you all do the same thing for us in your role here at ESAC. So there's a lot of similarity there. And then we've got 3 members who represent the public, and they bring the public consumer perspective to the commission. On ESAC, we have 1 public member, and that's the perspective that they bring too, right? They're there as representing the public, the real estate consumer. So that's the hat that they're wearing. So what about our advisory committees? We have a number of advisory committees, and they consist of stakeholders and that meet to address relevant issues in the real estate industry. And you'll see each advisory committee has a little bit of a different makeup. I think of, we've got a real estate inspector committee, right? They talk all things inspector. We've got the broker responsibility advisory committee. They talk all things broker responsibility. And then we've got ESAC, and we'll walk through that in just a second. But the advisory committees in general make recommendations to the full commission. So you'll see the chair of each committee do a report at each quarterly commission meeting where they talk about what the advisory committee's been doing. And if there are any recommendations that the committee is bringing forward, they will talk about those recommendations, the conversations that happened in advance of those formal recommendations being made to the full commission. So what about ESAC? ESAC is established by TREC rule to regularly review and revise curriculum standards, course content requirements, and instructor qualifications for qualifying and continuing education courses. We have, and this is a little bit of a different makeup, but it makes sense when you think about the purpose of this group. We've got 7 license holder members who have been engaged in the practice of real estate for at least 5 years prior to appointment and who are actively engaged in that practice. Sounds a lot like what I just said about the broker members of the commission, right? We've got 1 public member who's representing the interests of the general public, so they're wearing a different hat. And then we've got 4 education members who are real estate instructors or owners of real estate schools accredited by TREC that provide qualifying or continuing education. And so the education members are approaching it from that perspective, right? from being real estate instructors, from having that background. It doesn't preclude someone who's a license holder member from also being an educator, but it does mean you've got to know which hat you're wearing. And so we've got a great example of this today, okay? Because Kara was a license holder member in her first term, and she is now an education provider member in her second term. And so she's taken off the license holder hat and she's putting on the educator hat, which is, I mean, she's got to be aware of the hat she's wearing, but I think that's something that's pretty neat. And you know, you gotta put on the perspective of, this isn't about me and my practice, my daily practice. This is about consumer protection in an area where I know what goes on, I know what happens, I can see where some of the problems are, some of the issues, and that's the perspective that you're bringing. So it's a little bit of a balance between that real world experience, but with a nod towards the consumer protection side of things. And it's fun to, I don't know, everyone really brings a different perspective, especially this group, and it's fun to watch. You know, we try and have these groups be made up of pretty diverse backgrounds in terms of practice. And you'll see that in all of our committees, right? We've got people from small brokerages, large brokerages here, small schools, large schools, different geographical areas, because we know that makes a significant difference. So there's a lot of thought that goes into the statewide representation. Okay, I've said this 9 times. I'm going to say it again. This is the committee's made up of 3 different member types for a reason. I just said it: consumer protection, and we'll say that word a lot because that is really the drive of this group. So your experience is valuable, but it is imperative that you come to the table with ideas that protect the consumer, which ultimately serves both the public and the industry as a whole. Right? So with that consumer protection mindset, you know, the thought is that we're going to make rule changes, policy changes that are in the interest of the consumer protection. And the more we do that, the more that's established in the interest of consumer protection, the better your industry gets. Now here's a couple of cautions, right? I'm still a lawyer, so I can say this, that we really got to pay attention when you're a member of ESAC. You're kind of, I don't know, you're not always a member of ESAC, but right now you are both a license holder and a member of ESAC, right? And so you've got to be really cautious because people know this. This is a really engaged industry. I'm always very impressed by how engaged the industry is with TREC. But that means that you've got to remember that and make sure that the way that you speak about certain companies or business practices that you may not like personally, that's not really on the table right now, right? Because you're representing the commission. And in particular, I see this in meetings. And it's, I'm not like pinpointing this group, I say this to every group. But you really don't want to speak in favor or against certain companies or business practices. You don't want to be naming, you know, it can't be, gosh, ABC brokerage is the worst, and I would like to talk about that today at ESAC. Like, that's a hard no, right? But why? Because speaking in favor or against can result in perceived favoritism. So the opposite of that is, you know who gets it, right? ABC brokerage, they're incredible. That's a perceived favoritism. Or the opposite of that, right? Which is they're the worst. And then ABC is like, well, you know what? They're against me. The whole commission is against me. And let's say they have an enforcement issue come up. They've got a decent argument that there's been a lot of negativity about them at the commission. And what that results in is a loss of trust by both the consumer and regulated industries. And that goes both ways, because if everybody loves ABC and we're always talking about how much we love them, those that we're not talking about how much we love them are like, well, that seems unfair. Like they're not perfect. They do this and that. Why is the commission, always, or the committee always in favor of them? So we really try and do what I just did, which is ABC brokerage. And not name someone specific. Similar with business practices, if you're like, gosh, ABC brokerage does this thing. Oh, we're not going to do this thing, but like that, they're doing this thing and it is awful and it is wrong and it cannot happen because it is making it so that my business is suffering, right? That's not going to work either. And I know you guys know this. But I always like to reiterate it because I know it's hard too, right? You do have thoughts and opinions on these things. Just remember that you're bringing things to the table that are within the scope of ESAC, and that you're speaking of things neutrally and from a consumer protection standpoint. It doesn't mean you can't talk about things that are happening out there that have a consumer protection concern. You just want to make sure you're speaking about it in a way that's more neutral. You're not targeting anyone. Also, if you do start naming names, then I think you start getting into legal issues where you're being called to the stand. And as much as Abby and I love all of you, we will not be your lawyer in that situation, right? So you just really want to think about how you speak. People listen. All of these meetings are recorded, and so they're available online. And people do watch them, which I love. And there's a lot of people watching the live stream right now, which I also love. Okay, we're getting close to the end, don't worry. So the governor's letter from 2019, this is typically included in your materials. I think we sent it to the new folks. If we did not send it to you, then we will. It's a letter that directs licensing agencies to actively work to reduce barriers to entry, right? And so that's something that we know as an agency we've got to pay attention to. And so we couldn't say, you know what, there's too many providers out there. I say we raise the fees to $5,000 and that'll keep the little guys out who are no good, right? That's not true. I'm just saying that's an example of increasing a barrier to entry without a consumer protection standpoint. If you're just trying to get people out of the industry, that's no good, right? And then any rulemaking that we do, and I'll talk about this in a second, that potentially affects the marketplace. So like what I just said, right? Or if we were to say all brokers now need to have, I don't know, let's say 200 extra hours before they can become a broker on top of what they already have now, because there's a lot of brokers who don't do anything, and we think more education would really help that. Okay, like that's actually, aside from the part where you said they don't do anything, I said it. That's actually, okay, maybe there is a consumer protection component to that, right? Or maybe we're going to add, ESAC did this when I first started, they added the contracts requirement, right? And there was some debate about whether they were going to add it as 3 additional hours or whether it was going to be 3 within the 15. And those conversations, had it gone to 18, right? Had that been the discussion point, and that, ultimately made it to rule proposal. Did I say the 8? That's right, 18, right?
It is 18.
Oh, I just did this.
It could have gone to 21.
Sorry, 21. It's 15 is the cap and statute.
Yeah.
We were just talking about this. That was an Abby moment where I just knew what was in the statute off the top of my head, guys.
I'm impressed.
So thank you. So we had that gone through to 21 hours, it would have gone to the Regulatory Compliance Division of the Governor's Office. who looks at rulemaking that impacts the marketplace, and that includes increasing barriers to entry, right? And sometimes there is a reason for requirements to increase, for a number of things to increase. That office is going to look and make sure that the intent behind it is consumer protection, is within the mission of the agency. It's not being done either intentionally or unintentionally to keep folks out. And so if we're talking about a rulemaking like that, it cannot we cannot adopt the rule until the Regulatory Compliance Division signs off. And we haven't seen that as much with this group, just given the nature of rule changes that have happened in the last 5 years. But I always think about that, the contracts requirement discussion. And so the other thing we want to think about, we can't, as the government, right? The legislature lays out in statute our authority. So Chapter 1101 of the Occupations Code is what applies to sales agents, brokers, easement right of way. There's 1102 for the inspectors. You guys are really going to deal with 1101. That outlines the framework of what the agency is authorized to regulate, right? And I think Chelsea says it this way: that's the skeleton, and rulemaking is putting meat on the bone. So rulemaking talks about the more specifics of how we regulate things, right? So you can charge a fee. The actual amounts of the fees are going to be found in rulemaking, unless they're specifically laid out in statute, but I think most of those are gone. Things like broker responsibility course, that's a great one, right? So that's actually in statute, but we, through rulemaking, we have rulemaking authority that is granted to us. We can outline the specifics of that. Legal 1 and 2 is a little bit different actually currently, where it does lay out what topics we have to cover in statute. So we're always, if you're talking to Abby and myself, we are always going to have to go back and say, okay, where's our statutory authority to do this? We've always got to have the authority. It can't be, this is like when you're talking to your kids and they're like, well, you didn't say we couldn't go eat all of the cookies. Like you didn't specifically say that. And that doesn't fly in my house, and it doesn't fly in rulemaking, because we've always got to be able to point back to our authority, which is in 1101. And we will, okay. She didn't go through the rulemaking process in this one, and I won't go too far into it other than we're going to talk about some rules right now. But for the new folks, what you'll see typically at the committee level is they'll start talking about a change that they want to make. And that change is either going to be a statutory change, which requires a change at the legislative level, or a rulemaking change. And so we've got an entire administrative code of our rules. Those are actually what you as practitioners deal with more on a daily basis than you do statute. And all those rules come from our authority and statute, but those rules really flesh out the requirements on our license holders. And if you want to make a change to one of those rules, what happens is this group gets together, they say, you know what, let's cut this requirement, let's scrap it, and we're going to do something else. You'll talk through that, you'll take a vote to recommend for proposal, which I'll get to in just a second. Your chair will mention that when they're before the full commission giving their report. If it's a rule change, then Abby will later on in the meeting talk about that rule change and what it does, what the impact is, and the commission will vote as a whole. They're going to get a majority vote as to whether to put forward that rule for proposal. And proposal just means It is published, it is out there, it is on our website for folks to comment on of like, you know what, I don't think you should remove that because it's going to make it so that X, Y, and Z happens, and those are not the consequences that we want. We think this might be unintended, or this is just a bad idea for the following reasons. Or you'll get the ones that we love, which is like, this is great, Trek is great, ESAC could not be better. You don't get a lot of those, but you do get them sometimes. And so what will happen then is at the next quarterly meeting, this group would get together and they would go through all of those comments and they would say, you know what? I didn't realize that is an unintended consequence. Let's adjust this language a tiny bit. Or they'll say, you know, I know this person thinks it's bad, but overall the consumer protection side of this is far outweighs, you know, what they're thinking is bad about it. We're going to go through all those comments. We're going to talk about them. Then at the following commission meeting, there will be Abby will get back up. She will say, hey, we got all these comments. These are all of the things that happened. These are the discussions that ESAC had, and ultimately they've made one change to clarify this, and they're recommending formal adoption of the rule. And if the commission votes in favor of that, then you've got a rule change. That rule change will be adopted. Now, is there some timing and all those things that happened? Yes. In terms of, you know, how many days before it becomes effective. You're seeing, you know, contract form changes went live the 3rd, right? Those are the results of rulemaking, because those are all tied to rules. I think that's something that people think about a lot with the rulemaking. So this group will do a lot of that. That's really where this group affects change, is through rulemaking changes. And I'm always happy to talk about that with any of the new folks. If you need any guidance, feel free to ask questions. Everybody in this group's real nice. And we're going to see later today a rule that has already, or rules that have already been out for proposal, right? So today is the meeting where you're going to give one comment. You're going to talk about the comment. You're going to see if anyone else brings up some concerns they might have, or why they don't think that comment, you know, outweighs the consumer protection side of things or whatever. And then this group will formally vote as to whether to recommend to move those rule changes forward for adoption. So you're really jumping in sort of in the middle of the rulemaking process. Okay, here it is, guys. Here's the moment where this crashes and burns. I'm going to try to play this video. And I have to mute the surface so that you all can hear it. Amber, am I doing this right? Let's try it. If for some reason it starts playing and you can't hear it, just wave your arms at me and I'll stop. You may be asking, why are we about to watch a video from the Texas Senate? This is actually a meeting of the Sunset Commission, and they are the group that takes a look at different state agencies to see whether that agency should be continued, whether they're fulfilling their purposes, should they be disbanded, is it still needed? But they also look at all of the efficiencies of the agency. And we had a very limited, oh yeah, yes, that's right. But wait, I'm gonna mute that.
You have that.
No, but I'll get up and do it. I don't know, I'll just get up and do it. So this, we were there for very limited purpose review back in the fall about disclosures on contracts. What you're about to see is not about us, it's actually another agency, but it is really instructive, like about what the legislature intends when authority is granted to an agency. And it's very similar to the description I gave earlier about, you know, well, you didn't say we couldn't climb up into the cabinet and eat all of those cookies. You didn't specifically say you could not. You're going to see what the legislature thinks when an agency sort of circumvents their authority or goes outside the bounds. And I bring this up because this is something that we deal with daily, and as this committee also takes a look at, right? Like, you need to understand the framework of what we can and cannot do because we are the government. So I just think this is a really helpful clip. Okay, so we're gonna mute the surface.
Vanessa, try to unshare, and then when you reshare, click that button that says share audio right above where you select which screen.
No good.
Okay, you know what? I think it's because I'm on a Surface and it's like I don't have all the programs. Here's what we'll do. We're gonna send it to you and I want you to listen to it. But you essentially got my message, which is just because the law said we can't do this very specific, or the law didn't say we couldn't do this thing, right? So the law was silent as to whether we could start charging, you know, whatever X, Y, and Z, or doing this, then we can do it, because you didn't tell us we couldn't do it specifically.
It's like there's no assumptions in the law. So there's one agency said, well, the law didn't say we couldn't do that. And so we went ahead and did it. And so this member of the legislature during sunset was just ripping them a new one, basically saying, you think you can make all these decisions, but that's our job. And we were sitting in the sidelines like, oh gosh, yes, of course. But also it's very instructive because you sit around a room like this and you kind of want all the authority that would be helpful in a certain situation. And this agency that they were talking to, they weren't trying to just like collect power. They were trying to do something that made sense, but they didn't have the authority to do it. And so the legislature, this member of the legislature just said, you can't do that. And it was very public and pretty embarrassing for this agency. And so we sat in the corner and we're like, this is really helpful to see and to remember. And so we're sharing it with all of you.
And that's exactly right. So we just like to remember that, like Chelsea said, because it's easy to forget at times when you really want something. So this is also why you will always hear Abby and me say, wait, we've got to go find our authority to do this, right? We've got to find the authority to make this change. And we actually have to cite that authority when we do rulemaking. So it's a good one. I know there's one more slide. Hold on. Okay. Last slide. Don't worry, guys. We're almost done. So why are we here? Why is staff here? It's to do this really long training. No, it's we're here to provide the agency insights, right? So if you've got questions about curriculum standards and all the things going on in education, Jen Wheeler is here. She's the main liaison. She's the director of examination, education and examination services, right? You've got Mike here. He's the strong arm. He's our director of enforcement.
Are you going to show your muscles? No.
Bummer. You've got Denise here, who is our director of licensing. And I mean, I think that says it all, right? So she can tell you all of the requirements for everything. But a lot of times there's a real interplay between education and licensing. So she's a great resource. We have her here. You've got Chelsea here, our executive director. And she provides that insight from the executive director level. And then you've got the lawyers of Abby, our new general counsel.
Have we said that in this space?
I said it in an email.
Okay, good.
And so and I'll tell you, my role is also not going to change so much because I have a similar perspective that Abby does. And it's to talk about, we're here to provide that agency insight on the legal threshold and the policy threshold, right? So, you know, anyone who's been in a meeting with Abby knows that she can cite every rule in a heartbeat. She knows the contract better, language better than I think anyone, honestly. I'll just say it. I think Ron Walker would agree with me on that. And so she's there to provide open meetings questions, or answers to that, or make sure we're doing things right, posting the agendas. Like there's all kinds of things that go into scheduling these meetings, and then to be here for when questions are being asked. And sometimes she'll say, I can't answer that question right now. And that is because it's a bigger question. We have to go back, talk about it, figure it out, and then come back. And my role is similar. Except I don't, you know, I think what we're doing is I'm going to be more of the one who's talking about the bigger policy questions and the impact on the agency, which is pretty similar to what I've already been doing. So I won't really change. Abby won't really change the way you see in the meeting, but I think that's because we were already kind of doing those things that way. But we're here to provide that agency perspective. So if you're like, you know what, we want to do X, Y, and Z, and Denise is like, that will blow up our licensing system. That's helpful for you to know before you go and recommend it. And then what happens during, we talked about this. What happens during ESAC meetings and where the recommendations go? They go to the full commission. There's one step in the middle, which is if you make a recommendation for a rule, like to propose a rule, the next day at workshop, which is like a smaller meeting, or that afternoon of the commission, they'll talk through that recommendation and provide feedback. And then maybe that's even before it goes for proposal. So there is a workshop component to that. But ultimately it goes to the commission, and they're going to vote whether to move forward or not move forward. So your role is really important. You have an impact on the daily practice of your industry, and we are happy to have you here. We're thankful, and hopefully this is it. I'm done.
All right, thank you. I see Commissioner Russell's here and also unmuted. Did you want to say something?
No, I've been struggling with technology, so glad I finally got on. Thank you.
Okay, you are welcome. All right, agenda item number 5 is discussion and possible action to amend July 8th and October 7th meeting minutes. We had to pass on these items last meeting, so there's 2 sets of meeting minutes included here. They're posted on the website. They don't need a vote to approve them. Does anybody have any changes that need to be made to the minutes? All right. Hearing none, let's go to agenda item number 6, which will be the election of officers. We've got 3 positions: presiding officer, which is chair, assistant presiding officer, which is vice chair, and the secretary. And for each position, we're going to take a nomination. And as soon as we have a nomination and people can nominate themselves, then we'll vote. We'll do that by a voice vote, and then we'll move on to the next position. So we'll start with the first one, which is the presiding officer or the chair. Do we have any nominations for that position?
Bill Steedman.
All right. I've heard someone nominate me. Any other nominations? Hearing none.
You don't even have to vote.
We don't have to vote on that. Now we'll go to the assistant presiding officer or vice chair. Do we have nominations for that position? I propose Brian Underwood.
Byron.
Any other Byron, are you okay with that?
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
All right. Any other nominations? All right. No need to vote there. Brian will be the vice chair. and then we'll move on to secretary. Any nominations for secretary?
I'll gladly handle secretary. I'll nominate myself.
Oh, all right, Cassie Scott. Any other nominations for secretary?
Y'all are an easy
All right.
bunch.
It's a very easy bunch. Hearing no more, we don't need to vote there. So we have our 3 officers. So that works out well from there. Congratulations. And let's go on to public comments. There was a public comment where a member of the public contacted us and submitted a letter. Is there any way we can share that letter on the screen? Because it's a 2-page document and it comes from UNT, and the essence of the letter, if I could summarize, it's fairly long. It's a university and they put in an application for approval on principles 1 and 2, and they were assuming they were going for 60 hours, and the commission approved 45 hours. So I don't know whether it's just a communication issue or not. I'm also not sure, to be honest with you, Jennifer, what impact this has on ESAC, or if we even have any decision on this.
Sure. Thanks, Bill. I do think this is more of an inquiry that kind of lies with staff. There is, and I do believe we have some helpful information that could assist Mr. Moffett in this scenario, but I agree with you. I don't think that this really falls within the purview of ESAC as it relates to academic credit hours or semester hours and how those are calculated. Do have a rule reference from the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board that I think might be helpful, but probably better to be managed offline. And we're happy to do that.
All right. So a point of question, Mr. Moffat's here and he has his hand raised. Is he allowed to talk or not talk?
That's at your discretion. I only hesitate because typically we don't do that, but if you'd like to hear from them, then yeah, we can. Amber has got to change his settings real quick. I mean, he's here. He wants to speak, so I think it makes sense. Okay.
All right.
Okay. Looks like Amber just gave him. Okay, so yeah, there you go. You got it.
All right, Mr. Moffat, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it there. I want to start off. I want to thank all of you for your service. I also want to thank staff. They've been great. My letter here, I want to be absolutely clear. Staff's been great to work with, and I think that to the extent that the committee could opine or provide guidance in this scenario thing, I think staff would be open and welcome to that. I think ultimately what we're dealing with here is really an interpretation issue, and I think ultimately it's going to boil down to kind of modernizing the interpretation of this either policy or implementation of it there. Essentially what happened, we applied for a 60-hour course to get principles 1 and 2. So we teach a semester-long principles course. We have 45 hours of what we call butts and seats time. Okay, so we actually have students in class 45 hours. And then they're going to be required to do additional external study time. Number 1, reading the book. Number 2, taking chapter exams and all that kind of stuff. They're going to be in this course between 70 to 90 hours of actual work in order to get done. And so ultimately at the end of the day, we're only going to get credit for one of the 2 principles courses. And after a 4-year degree at our university, they're still going to have to go out and take principles 2 somewhere else and pay for that. And so, I've asked for the documentation on that. I haven't seen it yet. And again, I want to be very clear. I am very grateful for staff and their help on this. My issuance of this letter was more of a timeliness issue in case the ESAC does have jurisdiction over this issue. I would respectfully ask that they try to work on, providing some guidance here. But, just as a hypothetical here, a scenario, if I were to take my students, and just think about this for a moment, if I take my students during the semester that we have, and I tell them, while you are sitting here in this course, in this classroom, physically present, I want you to log into an online provider and take Principles 1 and Principles 2 during the time that they're sitting there in those seats, and they complete that. They do exactly the same thing that somebody would do in an online course. At the end of the day, my course would only still get them credit for Principles 1 and or 30 hours of course credit. And I just think that that's a mismatch. And we talk about barriers to entry there that we talked about in the opening slide there. I think this is a barrier to entry. I think that the quality of education that we're putting forth are very important there. I think we're doing a great job. We're talking about a lot of these scenarios, real world stuff. And so we're just asking to get credit for that. And so to the extent that the ESAC has the ability to opine in this area, we would certainly appreciate it and be very grateful. Again, thank you to staff. They've been amazing. We still have several follow-ups there on that. So, but again, I wanted to submit this in a timely manner so that you all would have an opportunity to look at it just in case. That's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any ESAC members have any questions? Hearing none, I would ask that Jennifer, can you and Mr. Moffett get together and work on that? And then if we need to make an agenda item, we will. Is that fair? All right, super. Moving to agenda item number 8, and it's discussion and possible action regarding proposed changes to the following rules. 535.65, which is responsibilities and operations of providers of qualifying courses. 535.70, definitions, and 535.72, approval of non-elective continuing education courses. And all those rules are in the course material, and they pertain to 2 specific situations, I believe. The first is proctoring, and proctoring for SAE classes and removing the requirement for proctoring. And that was discussed at our last meeting and brought to the commission. It's an example of a rulemaking area that Vanessa was talking about. And after workshop, the commission opened it up for comments, and we did receive 1 comment from Rebecca Pittens. I cannot pronounce her last name. I apologize, Rebecca. No offense meant. This spoke in favor of both the proctoring change and in favor of the photo identification change. I think what we need to do now is open it up and hear from the committee and your thoughts on whether we should move forward with this formal recommendation to the commission, or if there's been a change in mind and perspective. Questions for the committee? Anybody on the committee?
Chair, this is
Yes, sir.
Byron. Maybe I'm not reading this correctly, but I think if you look over at 535.65H1, that it says in there, the last little statement is, it reads, the final examination given at the end of each course must be given in the manner submitted to and approved by the commission, and all final examinations must be closed book. And then in 535.65H4B, which is to be striked, whatever that word is. It says, under 4, it says a provider must rotate all versions of the examination required by the rule of this subchapter, and then it goes on and says, in a manner acceptable to the commission, and must, and B is to be removed, be proctored by a member of the provider, faculty, or staff, or third-party proctor acceptable to the commission. And I don't think that those 2 match. I don't believe that we can unproctor exams and still require that the schools or the provider ensure that all final exams are closed book. And then if you look over at, sorry, let me flip back to my notes. At 535.65H5, it says ensure student who took the course is taking the exam. That's not what it says. Ensure that the student who is taking the exam is the person who registered and took the course. And so if we're removing the proctor language, then I'm not so sure. I mean, I just try to look at the process here. So I'm taking a course through maybe some online delivery method, and I get maybe through my online portal or through some email, there's a click to take the exam. Then so I share that with my friend who's been licensed for a number of years, and they go on there and take that exam for me. And so I'm concerned that removing the language where it says that the exam is proctored, then how can a provider or school ensure that H5 or H4B if we're not proctoring that exam? And so if we're going to remove the proctor language, then I think we also have to remove in H1 where it says that the exam is closed book. And then I think we need to strike H5.
Okay. Thank you for that. Other comments or comments back on that or questions on that from anybody on the committee?
Do you want me to make that suggestion?
Well, I think that's what Byron's.
Yeah,
suggesting.
I can speak on behalf of the education division because we have received, questions and concerns from our education providers about how they would be able to, to implement a closed book requirement if the proctoring requirement is removed.
Right.
And if you recall, the consensus of the committee was that there was less concern over whether the course exams were proctored, and or I believe the discussion included whether they were open or closed book, because like you said, the licensing exam itself is proctored and closed book.
Right.
So in order to implement it, I think it would require the removal of the closed book requirement in the rule.
Under H1.
That's right.
Yep.
So we just need to make that consistent.
Yep.
I think so.
Yes, please.
Okay. Good point. Any other comments?
Oh, Gabby might have an opinion on this.
Well, I think the question is reproposal. But
Right.
This is the room that we meet in.
This is what?
This
Do
is
what?
the room that
No, I
we.
think that's Commissioner Russell. I think.
Oh,
we can make that.
sorry.
No, you're okay.
All right. Any other comments from anybody on the committee? Candy, I see that you unmuted.
I've just had a question. I was trying to clarify. Vanessa, are you saying that if to do that, we need to send this back to the commission?
I think that's a significant enough change that you'd want to put it out to receive public comment on. Yeah, I do. Which is fine. I mean, that this has to go to inspectors too, who haven't met. And I don't know that, I mean, I'm saying this without a real knowledge of it, but I don't know that this is one that, is super time sensitive.
Right.
And so I think getting it right and going through that process again and allowing the public comment makes a lot of sense. And I think, I see Byron and Jennifer's points on this too.
Okay. Any other comments or thoughts from the committee? So do we have a proposal from the committee to remove the closed book requirement, send it back to the commission for a decision and then run it through the other committees? Is that the correct course of action, Vanessa?
Yeah, I think it'd be a motion to make the changes as recommended and reissue for proposal.
Okay.
So
Can I
Do
do
we have a
that?
motion?
Yes, that's the emotion that I would like to make.
Okay.
Byron's made,
Ju-
Byron's made the motion.
Yeah, under 535.65H1 to strike that last sentence that says all final examinations must be closed book.
And any other non-substantive changes that we might need to make as we look at this.
That sounds good.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? Second part to this rule change, and Vanessa, this may all get caught up in the same, and it may make sense for it to get caught up in the same, but it talks about identification. Does the motion that we just made cover everything and we do it all at the same time?
Hold on.
Seems cleaner that way.
Yeah, it does, but wait,
rules.
is oh yeah, because they're all together, right? Yeah. Yes. Which I think that works. I mean, doing sort of piecemealing changes also doesn't usually help, and it'll lock our rule up. And so I think that makes sense to just take it all back. And that would mean, I mean, we're only pushing it unless it's rejected wholly until May. Ultimately, that's when the adoption would take place. So, yes, I would do it all together.
I have a quick question. I can't figure out how to raise my hand. So, oh, do I have permission to ask a question?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. So I'm understanding that we're going to allow open book examinations by removing this.
Yes. Yes. And that allows for that conflict between a closed book exam without a proctor, and then going back to the origins of this being, you know, licensing exams are proctored, and ultimately that's, you know, that's truly what you want in terms of them being proctored. And I think there was discussion about the, you know, realities, burdens, et cetera, of the proctoring and its value. So it is a change, though.
Thank you.
And then we will, to the extent we need to, and I think we will, take that to the inspector committee meeting just to update them, since this also impacts them.
Perfect. All right. That being said, now we need to look at future agenda items. This meeting had very few agenda items. Chris, you've got your hand raised. I'm sorry. I did not see that till just now.
No problem. Thank you. I was just curious to get staff's opinion on the proposal, if appropriate.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's
sure.
appropriate.
I think this is an appropriate move because I think we would struggle with holding education providers accountable for ensuring exams are closed book if we don't have a proctoring requirement. I think that would be a struggle for us in education as far as advising or, you know, giving assistance to education providers, and probably make, you know, be a little bit difficult for enforcement to enforce. So I support this move. I appreciate it. It's gonna help be
Great.
helpful to us. Thank you for asking.
Thank you.
You can always ask that
Okay.
question. That's one of the reasons we've got folks here. So, so
Perfect.
you'll definitely have this rule before you to formally recommend or proposal at your next meeting with the changes that have been discussed today and anything else that needs to be tweaked. So you'll see
Okay.
that'll be on your agenda for next time. I don't think that's a super long agenda item, but you'll have the new draft version.
All right. And Abby, are there any I'm not Abby, I'm sorry. Jennifer, are there any courses that we need to take a look at, or are we caught up on everything?
I would suggest holding off on that a little bit. We've got the legislative initiative to take over the content for the pre-licensing courses for the sales agents. And I think we want to do some streamlining. So I wouldn't want to ask the committee to put a lot of work into something when we're going to be able, ideally, hopefully, be able to do something of a little more substantive if we get this legislative authority. So my recommendation would be just to hold off a little bit and let's see what happens this session.
Okay. And do we need to make an agenda item at all on the concern brought up with UNT, or is that something that you feel that will be handled in staff?
I think we can handle it on staff side if the committee would like, or Bill as the chair, if you would like me to report back to you on the outcome, I can do that. I'm happy to.
Yeah, I don't necessarily need a report back, but I also want to make sure if he brought it up and then we need to readdress it, that we don't lose sight of it. How about I just put it, do we have to decide on all the agenda items today, or are we able to add agenda items as we go on?
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's always kind of hard to do it in the moment unless you've got a, one that you're wanting to talk about. So you are welcome. The agenda items are at the discretion of the chair, but you're welcome to send anyone on the committee to send anything you'd like to general.council. And then we can work with Bill on what would go on there. And I encourage that.
This is basically your first opportunity to add agenda items, the first of many.
But send any, if you have any agenda items, send it to general.council. So that, and not to Bill, because of open meetings.
All right. Are there any other agenda items from anybody on the committee? Hearing none and seeing none, we'll move on to what always seems to be an interesting discussion, and that's dates and times for proposed meetings. We have proposed Monday, April 7th, Monday, July 7th, and Monday, September 8th, all starting at 10 o'clock. Are there any conflicts or concerns with anybody? All right, fantastic. Hearing nothing else, I move to adjourn.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you so much, everybody, and thanks for the virtual meeting, and hopefully everybody stays warm.
Stays warm and safe. All right, see y'all later.
Bye.